welcome to the Friday edition of The Pulse. We're coming to you live from our studios here at Kokomlemle. We're live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 125, and around the world on myjoyonline.com. Coming up this afternoon on The Pulse, former Director General of the National Law 3 Authority, Samuel Awuku, fights back, criticizing the Fourth Estate over what he described as, quote, fundamental and deliberate error, unquote, in its recent investigation. We have details as he insists the media outlets is conflating strategic marketing sponsorship with the funds from the NLA Good Causes Foundation. This afternoon on The Pulse, we bring you an exclusive conversation with an associate editor at the Fourth Estate to give you answers here on The Pulse. Also coming up, ECG terminates 202 out of 347 questionable contracts and reduces Haptel commission from 3% to 1.6%. We'll hear from the acting managing director of ECG, who has been briefing the Energy Committee of Parliament on its operation in the last few months. Also this afternoon on The Pulse, the World Bank cautions Ghana not to hasten its return to the Eurobond market, warning that such a move could drag the country back into the IMF bailout cycle. We have details as Ghana has spent 40 out of its 68 years of independence under IMF programs. Also coming up this afternoon on The Pulse, dozens of delegates from multiple nations walked out of the UN General Assembly Hall today as Israeli Prime Minister began his speech protesting Israel's action in Gaza and the ongoing conflict. Stay for details of that here on The Pulse. The Pulse, as always, is brought to you by Deaf and Drill Cough Expectorant. Deaf and Drill, breathe easy, feel better. My name is Faustina Safa, and as usual, please take a seat and be my guest. Thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. Now, we start with some of the key issues that are budding in the society. First, the former Director General of the National Lottery Authority, Sammy Awuku, has taken aim at the Fourth Estate, dismissing its recent expose as, quote, misleading, unquote, and describing the publication as a, quote, fundamental and deliberate error, unquote. The Equapin North MP accused the outlet of conflating strategic marketing sponsorship with funds from the NLA Good Causes Foundation. In his rebuttal, Mr. Awuku expressed disappointment that despite granting the outlet an interview on August 18, 2005, the final publication was, in his words, quote, a loop-sided story that omits the significant impact made by the foundation. Let's break down what the Fourth Estate published for you here on The Pulse. That very report that triggered Awuku's fight back. Now, it's all about the NLA Good Causes. And basically, what was the mandate? The mandate was that the lottery was to support physically and mentally afflicted, needy, aged orphans, as well as destitute children. But in reality, according to the Fourth Estate's expose, millions of cedis were spent on sponsorship of elite organizations and events. Now, according to them, the amount spent on about 96 beneficiaries is 4.7 million Ghana cedis. And these are some of the beneficiaries. The reason why the Fourth Estate is raising alarm, because the Good Causes Fund ought to have dealt with individuals who are needy in society. But then look at what we find. Emmy Africa Awards received an amount of 90,000 Ghana cedis. The Ghana CEO Awards received 350,000 Ghana cedis. Africa Prosperity Network Awards received 250,000 Ghana cedis. And GIPC's Ghana Club 100 Awards received 200,000 Ghana cedis. Now, the NLC conferences also received 250,000 Ghana cedis. The free SHS 5th anniversary celebration received 50,000 Ghana cedis. JIT magazine presidential diary publication received 50,000 Ghana cedis. The Glitz Africa Ghana Women Award received 50,000 Ghana cedis. Asamoah Gyan's memoir project received 50,000 Ghana cedis. Independence Day fanfare, 350,000 Ghana cedis. The AG's office also received 570,000 Ghana cedis, and members of parliament received over 1 million Ghana cedis. Now, according to the Fourth Estate, when they reached out to the NLA boss, this was what he said: if you're going strictly by the act, it would turn out that so many things that the NLA has been doing are illegal. I realized that the very reason for the establishment of the NLA is to provide or support good causes, and that's what all lottery bodies all over the world are doing. NLA does not operate in isolation, but as part of international bodies, the Office of the Chief of Staff requests funding for some of these events. Well, that's what the Fourth Estate found as part of their investigation. But the former NLA boss, Sammy Awuku, in a statement published just yesterday, described the publication as misleading. And on your screens now, excerpts of that statement that he put out yesterday, just detailing some of his key concerns and why exactly he feels that the publication put out is misleading. It says, and these are portions of it, I'm just quoting for you, the Good Causes Foundation is not a lottery. It aims to develop, implement, and maintain a structure based on health, education, youth and sports development, and arts and culture. I find it unfortunate that the names of NLA staff and other beneficiaries will be flagrantly under the guise of public interest without warning or right to privacy, and I would urge them to do better. The figures quoted for some of the donations, termed as glamorous, are not entirely accurate, he says. He says some of these sponsorship, he puts it, were actually paid separately over a 2 to 3 year period with 100,000 Ghana cedis approval threshold. I expect an accurate portrayal of the facts I presented to the Fourth Estate and not a loop-sided story that omits the significant impact made by the foundation. He goes on to state that during my tenure, I did my best to leave the NLA in a much better state than I found it, while the Fourth Estate seeks to highlight the ills of the NLA Good Causes Foundation. I believe an accurate version would be worth everyone's while, he states. So those are just snippets, really. The response is 8-page long. The reason why we can bring you all of that, but it's published on myjournline.com. You can go there right now as we speak. Open Sammy Awuku's response to the Fourth Estate and let's have a conversation. Because joining me in the studio now is an associate editor at the Fourth Estate, Set Bokwe. Thank you so much for your time here on The Pulse. A lot of things in this long statement. We appreciate your time, by the way. 8 pages. I'll do my best to take it one after the other so that we get proper responses from you, because according to Sammy Awuku in his statement, he says that your story was, quote, lopsided, omitting what he actually describes as life-saving projects and donations. And he's worried about it because he says the Good Cause Foundation actually embarked on quite a number of projects. And in this statement, I can see he has tabled quite a number of them. How do you respond to the claim that your publication is false and misleading?
I think it's basically an afterthought. I mean, this excuses he's giving is an afterthought. Because when we approached him for his side of the story, he told us that what he has done is to put the NLA's Good Causes Foundation in a state that can help society. But if you look critically at some of the expenses they made for this Good Causes Foundation, it does not in any way comply with what the law says. How do you spend money on Accra in Paris, for instance? Somebody travels to Paris for a musical concert and it inures to the benefit of the poor or destitute or an orphan in the Osu orphanage or the Kumasi orphanage. How do you justify spending 2 million cedis on an astroturf in his constituency? How does that inure to the poor child or the mentally afflicted? How about the 200,000 the Good Causes Foundation said is spent on a police post at the Supreme Court? How does that inure to the benefits of the poor child? There's a reason we have an interior ministry that caters for the needs of the police. There's a reason we have the local assembly with a DISEC head, who is the district chief executive or municipal chief executive, whichever way it may be, who caters for crime. There are institutions responsible for every single thing. If the Good Causes Foundation, which was set up to meet the needs of the poor, then begins to carry that cross, then there's a good governance problem.
And he goes on, I'm just looking through this report he put out. He says that your report is misrepresenting the facts because there are two issues here. He says there's the NLA Claritas lottery platform, and that has been established to rake in funds. So they are the ones in charge of sponsoring some of these events. And then there is the Good Causes Foundation. Based on your checks, is there even a difference in some of these things? Because he raises concerns that you lumped it all together.
Great. So if you read section 2.3 of the NLA Act at 722, it said there shall be a lottery, right? That lottery is the Caritas. So the Caritas is the source of funding for the Good Causes Foundation. So revenue raked in from the Good Causes Foundation, from the Caritas lottery, is what they use in funding the Good Causes Foundation. So for instance, he mentions that when he came, it was just 100,000 the Caritas lottery was making. He managed through his ingenuity, thanks to him. We don't dispute that. He's done a good job with that. But the fact that you've been successful in raising funds does not mean that when the funds are mismanaged, as we insist he did, we should not raise questions about it. It's like telling us that when government develops our country, but we find issues of corruption, I'm not saying he's done anything corrupt. If we found issues of corruption, we shouldn't talk about it. No. Now, the Good Causes Foundation, he raised those funds to spend on projects that he claims defines what the Good Causes Foundation is supposed to be. Now, this is what happened. The NLA has the Good Causes Foundation, and it has its own operations. They registered the Good Causes Foundation on June 8th, 2022, with a board, right? With a board of trustees. So it means that the account of the NLA's Good Causes Foundation should be separate from the entity itself. So every single amount you disburse needs approval. In his situation, he says, if the threshold is 100%, I can approve it. If it is beyond 100,000, it needs to go to the board. So in a year, in 2024, for instance, they spent 200,000 cedis on the CEO's awards. It was 100,000 given twice.
Yeah, he raises concerns because I'm just looking at his statement here. And he says that they were lumped together, referring to the amounts in dispute right now. And according to him, some was spread over a period of several years, not single payments. So he's raising concerns that you misrepresented the facts because some of these payments were spread over a couple of years. He says 2 to 3 years. Do you still stand by the numbers published?
We stand by it because the fact that we lump it together does not justify what has been done. Right? We said this was done between 2021 to 2024. Right? You cannot justify the expenditure because we lumped it together. The funds were meant for a certain cause. Was the fund used for that cause? No, it wasn't. If you go to corporate Ghana and say, I'm raising funds for the needy, for the aged, the mentally afflicted, and you use that fund to sponsor awards, you use that fund to give money to people to travel abroad. For instance, the Ministry of Public Sector Enterprise, a study tour of Singapore. How do you justify that? You cannot. There's no justification for it at all.
And then he goes on to state that different state lotteries, quoting worldwide in terms of what he tells us here, that there are different community projects that different state lotteries fund and not just direct welfare. And so he's questioning why you are saying that he misused the funds when worldwide there are structures like that existing.
Is worldwide law regulating his activity? What was the worldwide law regulating his activities at NLA when he was there? It was the NLA Act, right? We could have easily thrown away the law and say operates by the world standards. But there's a reason we have a law to govern what you were doing. If we raise concerns about what the law says, it's better for him to say, okay, we could have amended the law to meet what the world expects of us. It is better. But so far as this law remains on our statute books, and you're supposed to go by it, and you didn't do that, you can't justify what you did. You cannot.
Well, I can see here still on this statement, it's quite lengthy. So if you can go on myjournline.com, it's 8-page, and we're just taking it step by step to get a response from the Fourth Estate. You can also share your comments with us on all our social media platforms. We'll be glad to post it to the Fourth Estate for you. I'm just going through some of the key things.
And just to make a little clarity as well, he claims that we confuse the good causes expenditure with the marketing activities of the company.
Yeah.
Now,
which was to solicit partnership.
If you have an entity, right, that has operational costs, for me, my basic knowledge of corporate governance, if you have an entity that runs a business, right, it will have its operational costs. If you have an entity with a non-profit unit, that non-profit unit, which you have board of directors and everything for, will have separate accounts from the main organization. Now, if you lump everything, the data we had says Good Causes Foundation expenditure 2021 to 2024. So how do you turn around and tell me that I lumped everything together? Then it means that there's a serious problem with bookkeeping, accounting at the NLA. That is what it means.
And then it's quite lengthy, some of the things he's raising concerns. I'll try to break it down step by step. I can see here he's claiming that some of the sponsorship that they actually put out were influenced by requests from the governing board and even the Office of the Chief of Staff, he says in this write-up. Did your investigation uncover any of such requests from either the board or the Office of the Chief of Staff?
Well, see, it was up to him to provide evidence of it to us. If we ask you a question, how do you justify, we ask him this question, how do you justify the amount of money you have given to the Chief of Staff's office for Independence Day celebration? These are funds meant for the poor, the most vulnerable section of our society. And if you spend it on a fanfare on Independence Day, you tell me because it came from the presidency, it is justified. No, no. You can't raise funds for the poor and tell me that you sent it to the presidency because they requested for it. You have to be accountable.
Another thing he raises concern about, just right here in his statement, is his defense, really, for giving out the money to Emmy Awards and the CEO Summit. He says here that there were marketing strategies, and that even influenced NLA revenue by some 100,000 to over 1 million Ghana cedis. And so he's arguing that these investments they made directly benefited the Good Cause Foundation.
we have issues with that. We have issues with that. You know why? What does the law say about funds raised in the name of the lottery? And I kept saying that there's a difference between operational costs, which is the NLA's operational cost. The NLA is supposed to market its brand. The NLA is supposed to create awareness about its brand and the Caritas Lottery platform. If you use funds that you raised, most of the funds that he raised, if you compare let me give you a simple maths. He claims that he raised 11 million for the Good Causes Foundation, right?
Yeah.
Our calculation shows that they spent at least 12 million cedis on some of the things we are saying are questionable ventures. 12 million at least. I will not give you the larger volume, the larger amount, because we are still looking at it. But at least what we have gone through so far, at least 12 million cedis have been spent on these questionable ventures. And he is claiming that they raised 11 million cedis from the Good Causes Foundation. At least we've been transparent. We've released the entire document. The public can be able to go through it and do this calculation on their own. If he's telling us that he raised 11 million and spent 12 million, I think my maths is not that terrible. I think they should probably rework their maths. It doesn't add up.
And this 12 million they spent within what period?
From 2021 to 2024. I did mention that the Good Causes Foundation was registered on June 8, 2022. But they actually started spending money on it, on some of this. They started the disbursement before they even registered it. I would not fault them because even before he came in, the NLA was doing this disbursement, was doing charitable works before he came in.
He details that in his statement that they were already embarked on charitable works, and then they decided to make it an official arm, which is the Good Cause Foundation. I'm just going through his 8-page document, and he cited numerous projects that the Good Cause Foundation embarked on. Toilets, boreholes, hospital, refurbished, scholarships, you named them. But he says in your article, you do not give equal representation to some of these good works.
Firstly, we've published these stories in 3 parts, right? The second part of the story was actually along the full list of every single expenditure made. So how can he say that it was lopsided? We virtually give the entire data out for the public to scrutinize. So it is not correct.
Another key concern he's raising, I'm just looking at it, is about journalistic approach to telling this story. Your journalistic approach to telling this story. He's concerned that staff members of the NLA, their details were published. Even, he says here, patients who received medical support. And he's wondering why you would put that out. Is that against your editorial decision?
No, it is not. We are talking about public funds. And there must be transparency in the disbursement of public funds. If there are questions asked you about public funds and how you disburse it, the beneficiaries should not have a problem about them receiving the money. They got the money, didn't they? Did we put their phone numbers out? We did not. Did we put where they live out? We did not. What we did is to put out how much they got and for what purpose. And some of these purposes are even questionable as we raised.
And he suggests that your publication gave the impression that the NLA bought awards. How do you respond to that critic?
Fosti, pardon me. So in 2023, the NLA sponsors the CEO Awards. He wins it. 2024, they sponsored, he wins it. He claimed in 2022, they sponsored, but he didn't win. But our checks from the data does not show that they sponsored in 2022. So for every year they sponsored the award, he won it. The same goes to his deputy, Anna Homamieza. The same thing. They sponsored in 2023 some Good Governance Corporate Awards or so. She won it in 2023 and won it in 2024. They spent nearly 50,000 cedis on that. In his case, they spent about 350,000. And on both occasions, he won.
At the core of this dispute, do you believe that the Good Cause Foundation violated Act 722?
Absolutely. If you ask any lawyer to interpret this law to you and match it with the disbursements that were done, there are clear violations and breaches. That requires that they should investigate it. And I'm surprised that the internal auditor at the NLA could not spot this. Neither could the audit service spot this. And if the audit service spotted it, to the large extent, it would have appeared at the Public Accounts Committee. They missed all this for 3 years. They missed this for 3 years and allowed this to happen. I think there are questions to answer. The internal auditor should answer questions. Whoever audited them from the audit service should also answer questions.
And moving forward, how are you pushing this? Are you going to be petitioning some of the key institutions to look into this?
This is actually a tip of the iceberg. Expect something even bigger on the NLA's operations in the last 8 years.
Should we expect any petitions to the OSP, Shraj, for example?
So, like I said, for now, the story, this is just the beginning. It's snowballing. It's building up. So when we reach the crescendo, we'll take a decision on that. But I believe that the OSP and the other investigative body, anti-graft institutions are watching. So we leave them to take their action on it.
But since you believe he violated that act, decisive action from your part to see that justice is served.
So when we get to the bridge, we'll cross it. For now, we are still rolling the rest of the stories. So when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it.
Thank you so much for your time here on The Pulse. You're still watching The Pulse. When we return, we'll tell you what happened at the UN General Assembly when the Israeli Prime Minister was given his speech. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. Now, dozens of delegates from multiple nations walked out en masse of the UN General Assembly Hall today as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu began his speech, echoing global outrage over the devastating impact of Israel's action on civilians in Gaza. The U.S. delegation remained seated, reflecting its continued support for Israel amidst global criticism. Despite the walkout, Netanyahu delivered a combative address, asserting Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas and emphasizing his determination to, quote, finish the job, unquote, against the military group. Listen.
Please, order in the hall. Please, order in the hall. Mr. President, the families of our dear hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, last year, I stood at this podium and I showed this map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th. and committed acts of unspeakable savagery.
Well, that's the Israeli Prime Minister. And Netanyahu, we know, is facing accusations of war crimes and increase in international isolation, with several Western countries recently recognizing the Palestinian state. The UN General Assembly debate highlights tension between Israel's security concerns and international calls for peace, ceasefire, and recognition of Palestine and their statehood. But let's explore these issues emerging from the UN General Assembly. Join us now is Professor Daniel Dramani. He is Associate Professor at the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. We appreciate your time here on The Pulse. Also joining me is International Relations Expert Dr. Ishmael Hovo. We appreciate your time here on The Pulse. I'll start with you, just your initial reaction to what we saw play out at the UN General Assembly. Professor Dramani, I'll start with your reaction. What is this telling?
It's a clear indication that the UN system or the global, quite a number of countries are not happy with Israel, and they have really shown it through the form of what? Walkout. And I'm sure that that is a very strong protest to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that what the actions you are taking in Gaza are over the board. You have exercised so much reprisal attack. We don't even know the word to use, whether this time it has something to do with the October 7th attack, because I think Israel has gone far and far and far. And that is why most of these delegates or countries decided to walk out of his speech.
Benjamin argues that Israel has the right to protect itself and that it is doing exactly that with this war against Gaza. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the right to self-defense or right to protect the state of Israel is a right that is undeniable. That is right. But you see, the issue of, yes, Hamas did unthinkable acts. Hamas actually murdered Israelis. No two ways about that in October 7, 2023. That has been done. Israel went after the leaders of Hamas and virtually almost all the top leaders, commanders, and political bureau from all these areas within Gaza and outside Gaza. Most of them have been eliminated. Several thousands of civilians have been massacred. All these things are in the name of what? Self-defense. And I think that is overstressed. I think Israel, a time has come that there's the need for us to experience some ceasefire, because the level of attack, I think, is too much. Almost 2 years of fighting. And right now, the new policy they have is that Gaza City is the stronghold of Hamas, and the whole Gaza City will be reduced to rubble. And that is exactly what it's doing. I think that Israel has gone far too much, even though they have the right to defend themselves. But the right has been overstressed and over the board. They have gone too far.
But Benjamin tells us that they're still going to go on, and according to him, he's going to finish the job. That's his exact quote. He's going to finish the job. And what is this telling of what we should expect in coming days and the international implications, really?
Yeah, finish the job here simply means is that I think Israel have a very straightforward that Gaza will no longer be an area that will be habitable for the Palestinian people. Well, I know that they are targeting Gaza City. Once they are able to take out Gaza City, the next will be central Gaza. Khan Yunis area, they will ask them to also move. And once they succeed, the last port will be the southern Gaza, that is Rafah. They may force them, and eventually they'll find themselves in what? Egypt, and that will be the end of Gaza. I think that is the long term. So this particular fight is not going to end. And once they even chase them, there's also another aspect of it. Gaza attack, that's fine. There's even a plan to annex West Bank, which Netanyahu has made it very clear. His cabinet has given a signal that they are going to pursue. So eventually what is simply saying is that the way we will finish the attack on Hamas is to make sure that there's nothing called Palestine. I think that is that is where they're going. They will chase them out of their land, just as it happened in the years where many of them left for Jordan and never returned. That is how it's going to be. And that is his definition of finish the job. So it will take quite a long time. So, and that is why countries across countries in the, have expressed a lot of sentiment. They have opposed it. And if we can get a country like United Kingdom of all, that is the root. UK play a very key role in the creation of Israel. So going to the Balfour Declaration, that is, but today, United Kingdom has made a U-turn, enough of our support for Israel. So it's a clear indication that Netanyahu is losing the grounds, but as he said it, he's not bothered. He's not bothered. And I think the biggest country that can bring Netanyahu to order is United States of America.
And that brings me to my next question, really, because we saw that the U.S. delegates, they sat through his speech declaring the U.S. support for Benjamin Netanyahu. What is that telling, really, of what the implications will be moving forward, knowing that Israel has the backing of the U.S.?
Yeah, as long as the United States, which currently act more or less as a superpower, I think Netanyahu will continue to go by that tangent of defiance against all odds and will continue to do all this kind of violence upon violence and move them. Even though he has said that, he made a very interesting statement that Israel is not committing genocide. Because if you're committing genocide, you will not tell the people that leave. I'm giving you 10 days to leave. So it means that they have pre-informed them. But it's settled gradually. You are finishing all their buildings, schools, hospitals, all the housing and everything. So it is not far from being a genocide. It's a very systematic one. Possibly they are doing it with some human face, but that is the same thing. At the end of the day, there will be nothing like Gaza. And all this thing, Israel is able to do it because of the strong support of the United States of America. And that's why he praised Donald Trump as a strong leader, as the right leader, because once he gets the backing of Donald Trump, I think he will continue the same tangent. Yes.
Prof, stay with me. I'll come back to you for some more reaction. But let me bring in Dr. Ishmael Hovo, who's also joining the conversation. Doc, I would like to start with your initial reaction. We're seeing other delegates walk out from that UN General Assembly when Netanyahu was delivering his speech. Your reaction?
Thank you, and good afternoon to you yourself and your viewers. Good afternoon to Prof too. I think that generally it's just the general growing protest and about what Netanyahu and Israel is doing in Gaza. So as you see them walk out, they are just using the UN forum to demonstrate their displeasure about the continuous bombardment of women, children, hospitals, schools, and other non-military facilities in Gaza. But it also represents, it reflects the limits of the UN, particularly the General Assembly, and the whole structure of the UN, in the sense that in as much as all these nations want the war to end, because of the particular composition of the Security Council, they were left with no choice but just to walk out of the speech. But then again, you see that the largest supporter still remains there, to offer the symbolic support to Netanyahu. So far,
with the U.S. siding with Israel, will there be any end in sight to this war, really?
Once the U.S. remain on their side and given the military might, the economic might of the U.S., they will continue to do what they want to do. But you see that presents a challenge to them, even in the long term, in building a safe and secure Israel. You will not be able to tell a child whose mother you killed with a bomb that child and Israelis should live in peace. So the more you try to defeat the terrorists with bombing, the more terrorists you create for the future. That's the other side of this kind of posture. Because fine, there was October 7th, there was hostages that you need to release, but then there's also the belief that a negotiated settlement could bring those out those hostages. You cannot say that the Palestinians do not have the right to exist or you want to uproot Hamas at all costs. In fact, we have actually dealt a heavy blow to Hamas. It will take them years to even recover. And you have one of the most elaborate security networks in that region to continue to take down Hamas leaders without the kind of war that we are currently pursuing. So virtually, it's like once the United States is there, Israel will continue to do what they are doing. And because now they even go and include other countries that are trying to mediate in the conflict, that's becoming dangerous for all of us. So, for instance, when you attack a hotel in Qatar, and assuming Qatar also decided to retaliate, you attack other territories, all those nations decided that we will retaliate, that means that the whole region will be in turmoil. So, at some point, Netanyahu would have to realize that this conflict have to come to a negotiated end. But then again, the U.S. is in support. So it will continue. We don't see an end to it, but we all pray that it comes to an end very soon before it degenerates into a bigger regional war that virtually will affect some of us who are far away, rely on petrol and other things from that region.
And this is worrying, really, especially because we're hearing from Netanyahu tell us that he will finish the job. And he's making that defense, really, that they're not committing genocide because he gave individuals and residents in Gaza the opportunity to evacuate. Is that an option that we can explore?
The point is that even if you talk to Hamas, they will say they are not terrorists. Is that not the case? So you don't expect him to say that he is committing war crimes or he is committing genocide. The fact that you give leaflets to people to leave an area and they will return to come and find their buildings in rambles, and virtually they may not even return because the state at which you leave that area after the bombardment will be uninhabitable. So how will you then say that this is not war crimes or this is not a crime against humanity? You are bombing areas where people are seeking shelter. The very people you say go and seek shelter, sometimes they are in refugee camps, and then you bomb them. So I think that the whole bit lie on the man Netanyahu, who before this war, if you watch the political terrain in Israel, he has so much domestic issues. He has court issues to attend to. And for him, this war has become a political lifeline. So his continuous stay in office as a prime minister of Israel depends on this war. So part of the continuous position of Netanyahu depends on his own political survival. So as it is, we can't say that we are seeing children being killed, we are seeing women being killed, we are seeing people starving to death. And we want to say that, well, because I give them a leaflet that they should leave, that doesn't constitute any war crime. Then everybody can do same and say there's no war crime. There are people who have been put on trial for lesser offenses than these. So why will you still insist that it's no war crime? But then again, you have the backing of the largest military in the world. You have the backing of the largest economy in the world. If you have such backing in this very international system, you can do whatever you like. And so that the more he continues to do that, the more he undermines the very podium he goes to sit and speak. Because that podium is supposed to be a podium reserved for people who want the world united in seeking solutions. But if you are somebody who believes that might can solve all the solutions, then that forum, that podium is actually the wrong place to be.
And just yesterday, we heard from our president, John Dramani Mahama, recognize that there's a need for Palestine to be recognized as a state. And that raised questions, really, just yesterday. Now that we're seeing the U.S. backing Israel, will that compromise our relationship with the U.S. and even Israel itself?
I'm not so sure about that. Of course, in as much as we are friends with you, we also have the right to pursue our independent foreign policy. In fact, when this October 7 happened, the first statement that was released by Ghana says that we sympathize with Israel and we acknowledge the right of Israel to self-defense. But the problem is that as this war progresses, we have found out that the right to self-defense will be overstretched to other areas. So even as we speak, we are still friends with Israel. We still have issues with Israel. We are very good partners, but the fact that you are going astray doesn't mean that we should not express our opinion or we should not express our disappointment as what we are doing. It's other than that, then we will say that any of our friends who attack other nations, let us keep quiet. You also recall that when Russia invaded Ukraine, we took a position. It doesn't mean that we don't like the Russian. It doesn't mean that we will not do business with the Russian. But on that particular issue, the state of Ghana disagree with the approach you are using. And it is right to do that. Ghana-Israel relation will still continue. Ghana-US relation will still continue. In fact, we support them when we think that it is necessary to support them. And when we disagree, we are right to disagree. It doesn't necessarily mean that once the person is your friend, hook, line, and sinker, everything he says, everything is that you must support or you keep quiet. Keeping quiet is not going to be the best position for Ghana. In the face of babies dying, in the face of women dying, in the face of hospitals being bombarded, then you say that because you want to be neutral, you are keeping quiet. That would be negative neutrality. That's not the position of Ghana all these years. Our position has always been positive neutrality, which means that while you are playing roles to try and bring a conflict situation like this to an end, you are also free to make your opinion known on issues like this. Because this issue, the only way this Netanyahu will come to some resolution is if we have all the nation pushing the United States to try and put pressure on Netanyahu to come to the table. So I think that Ghana-US relation, Ghana-Israel relation will still continue regardless of our position on this issue.
Dr. Ishmael Lovo, stay with me, and Professor Dramani also stay with me, because I just want to bring us some key details that have been coming up during the UN General Assembly. Africa's presidents at the 80th United Nations General Assembly are taking tougher line, seeking a stronger role in global governance, peace and sustainable development, and a fair world order. Front and center are the long-standing demands for a permanent African seat on the UN Security Council that came up yesterday. President John Dramani Mahama raised concerns about that. Leaders say the current structure is outdated and unjust. Migration and the Israel-Palestine war, just like we've been discussing, as well as global inequality, are also dominating Africa's agenda. But while some are impressed by the continent's new boldness, others are asking what's fueling this seeming sudden energy. The former U.S. President, who is currently U.S. President Donald Trump, addressing the General Assembly some days ago, slammed the Biden administration for what he tags in his words, quote, alien and mentally deranged persons, allowing them into America. But instead of echoing the negatives, Ghana's president, as I told you, John Dramani Mahama, highlighted the contributions of migrants, insisting that they strengthen communities in the U.S. and Europe. Listen.
It is not a mystery that when leaders of Western nations complain of their migration problems, they are often referring to immigrants from the global south. When we speak of migrants, we speak of Mami Ewusi Mensah Frimpong, a judge on the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. She's the first black female judge on any of California's 4 federal district courts. She was born here in America to immigrant parents from Ghana. We speak of Peter Bosman, a medical doctor in Ghana who moved to the town of Piran in Slovenia in the 1980s and later became the first black mayor of Piran, the first black mayor in Slovenia and in the whole of Eastern Europe. We speak of T. Michael, the iconic Ghanaian Norwegian artist and designer. And of course, we speak of the late Kofi Annan, former United Nations Secretary General. Former United Nations Secretary General and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, who was born in Ghana but spent his adulthood in various places in America and Europe. These are people who have brought great distinction to the countries that they decided to call home. Just as the migrants and the children of migrants before them did, I dare say these are not invaders. These are not criminals.
Well, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa went further, calling in blunt terms for an end to Israel war in Gaza.
For as nations that have pledged to uphold the UN Charter, we have the ultimate responsibility to ensure and protect the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, consistent with the case that South Africa brought before the International Court of Justice. There is growing global consensus. There is growing global consensus that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Just last week, the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry found that Israel is responsible for the commission of genocide in Gaza. As Palestinians continue to face genocide and famine, we have a duty to act. South Africa has acted in the interest of saving lives by insisting that the International Court of Justice should make a ruling that indeed genocide is being committed in Gaza and that it should stop. And we stand here to say it must stop.
And Kenya's President William Ruto pressed hard for Africa to finally take its place as a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, Africa also marks 20 years since the Ezulwini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration, the two historic milestones that establishes the common African position on UN Security Council reforms. For 2 decades, Africa has spoken in one voice, demanding justice, equity, and representation in the highest organ of global governance. This demand, however, continues to be ignored, deferred, or endlessly debated to the detriment of both Africa and the legitimacy of the United Nations itself. You cannot claim to be the United Nations while disregarding the voice of 54 nations. It is not possible. Africa is no longer willing to wait on the margins of global governance while decisions about peace, security, and development are made without our understanding, without our perspectives, and without our voice. Africa's exclusion is not only unacceptable, unfair, and grossly unjust, it also undermines the very credibility of the United Nations, this organization. Africa dominates most of the Security Council agenda, provides some of the largest contingents of UN peacekeeping forces, and bears the heaviest costs of instability. Yet we remain the only continent without a permanent seat at the main table where decisions about our destiny are made. Africa deserves, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least, 2 permanent seats with full rights, including the right to veto, and 2 additional non-permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council. The world must understand that reforming the Security Council is not a favor to Africa or to anybody. It is a necessity for the United Nations' own survival. If the United Nations is to remain relevant in this century, it must reflect today's realities, not the post-war power arrangements of 1945.
Well, we still have on the line Professor Dramani and Dr. Ishmael Hovo. Let's just get your quick reaction to some of the key concerns raised by other African leaders. I'll start with you, Professor Dramani. We're hearing from African leaders push for a fair share of that seat before the Security Council. We lack representation. They feel it's time. We had our president make that call. It's not the first time that call has been made. What is the difference this time? Do you think that call will be heeded too?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this is a call that is very right, appropriate, and legitimate. For almost 20 years, African Union has been pushing strongly for Africa's voice in the United Nations Security Council. General Assembly, we have the numbers, but the Security Council, the veto power that is confined to 5. That is where Africans are demanding that at least one of the seats should be reserved for Africa with a veto power. And also remember, that is a continent with a large number of states, so much numbers, 54 member states, but not represented. Europe, the size, the population, Europe has 3 veto members. Asia is represented by China. What about Africa? And that is why I'm saying that it's a legitimate request. And the time to reform is now. And I believe that Africa must continue to push hard for UN reform, because there's no equity when it comes to the decision-making of the United Nations Security Council. The Security Council is very important because its decisions have binding effect, unlike General Assembly, which may be like a talk show, but Security Council decisions are binding. So where you want to take a very good decision that promotes the interests of Africa and other countries of the global south, it can be vetoed. We need a representation, at least one. So
but this is not the first time we've made the call, really. And so I'm wondering, is this telling, really, about how the world views Africa, neglecting our concerns and demands for so long?
Yeah, sometimes it's not that they are ignoring, but I believe that we can go an extra mile to also do what we call the gunboat diplomacy. We need to get closer, use other means that they'll be able to hear us better and act. And that is the aspect that we haven't looked at. Sometimes you can do some behind-the-scene lobbying. I think we need to do more, because those who have the veto power, if we're able to work through them, they may not be interested, but we can get one. Just look at the approach that Macron did when he decided to visit his colleague in the United Kingdom, lobby with him behind the scene, that it is time, I'm going to recognize Palestine, and I want you to be by me. Let's go as a team. Let's go so that our voice will be wider, because, and eventually, that approach has yielded. And I believe that AU is part, we can use other areas to get there. We could use BRICS, of which South Africa is a key member, a foundation member. South Africa can use that particular channel, work through China, work through Russia. And that is another aspect. There are other countries that also are in a good relation with US, France. They also work in that way. As long as we're able to get these permanent members behind the scene and able to get them, then we will be moving away from only the talk show to action. We need some behind the scene approach to be able to get some of the bigger forces to see the need for Africa to have a veto. I will think that even one should be enough. We could even go for one, and that is the starting point, so that the continent is also represented properly on the Security Council.
But if we're taking the lobbying approach, each state would certainly have their demands. And would that open up Africa to another colonial rule, if you put it?
It may not necessarily be so. What they will just do is to give a slot to African Union. And African Union, as a regional continental body, will find their way around it. I know bigger countries like South Africa is so much interest. Egypt is interested in Nigeria. These are the two countries that have at the front line. That, for me, is not a problem. Any of them that get it is fine. Africa just needs a say, and Africa needs a slot. And wherever it will go, for me, it's not material, but that the continent needs to have a representation.
Dr. Ishmael Hovo, thank you so much, Professor Dramani. Let me bring in Dr. Ishmael Hovo at this point in time just to get his reaction to this. We're hearing from Professor Dramani propose that we take the lobbying approach. Is that how we should go about it when it comes to demanding our fair share of a seat in the table when it comes to the Security Council?
Of course, that is one approach. That is one among several approaches that you can use. So we could actually look at the relation African countries, as I said, African countries have with various countries and leverage on it as a negotiating strategy. But we must also look at the African Union as a strategy where we strengthen the African Union to the point where it's able to address most of the fundamental issues in Africa, and therefore begin to speak more with one voice. Now, this current generation of leaders seems to have a particular orientation to speak with one voice. But then they will not be there for forever. And one of the things that the West has played with is that they wait until a certain generation pass away and business continue as usual. So one of the things that Africans should do is that first, let's get our own houses in order, begin to make good use of our resources, put a lot of resources into the hands of the AU. Currently, the funding arrangement where much of AU funding comes from outside sources is not going to help us in terms of making claims like this at the international level. So let's strengthen our own AU. The AU should then be in a position to solve major issues in Africa. Then that becomes a springboard to make a stronger case that, listen, we are able to solve problems here, and therefore we need a seat to solve it. But for the fact that Africa needs a seat, no one can dispute that. Because if you look at some of the decisions this council has made that have been implemented in Africa, and if you look at the consequences, if an African a nation or Africans were to have representation there, some of those decisions would not have been made. You look at Libya, for instance, where a simple no-fly zone was deliberately misinterpreted to mean regime change. And we know the consequences we are facing as Africans. And in fact, some of the European nations are also facing the same consequences, because Libya used to be a buffer between them and between Europe and Africa in terms of migration. Since the fall of the Gaddafi regime, you see the boats landing more on their shores. You also see more the effect it had on the Sahel states. But if African countries were to have victory, I'm sure that that decision would have been prevented. But then again, we must also get ourselves in order. We must begin to strengthen our own local continental-based institutions, which will then be in the place to coordinate how we respond to certain crises on the continent, limit the influence of these major powers in terms of their penetration into Africa, because they are able to get their way around us, because we are not acting most at times as a unit. We are always acting as individual blocks. So I think that the best approach for Africa is that strengthen your own continental-based governance structures, like the AU, like ECOWAS. Then as you begin to make inroads in terms of solving your real problem, then it becomes more easier for you to push others for a seat at the table, which will be difficult because, you know, power is such that those who hold the power and they are enjoying the benefit, they will not give it to you easily. But as we continue over time, they may find reasons with us and allow us in. But I would not want Africa to go into a Security Council with a permanent seat without veto. That is virtually to say, come and observe me do what I'm doing, and then you legitimize it by being there, but you didn't actually have a say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ishmael Hovo, an international relations expert. I also have been speaking to Professor Daniel Dramani. He's Associate Professor at the Legon Center for International Affairs. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time here on the Pulse. Now, away from that, former President John Awuku Kufuor is calling for a reform, advocating for a second chamber of parliament to oversee appointments to crucial independent bodies like the National Media Commission and the National Communications Authority. The former president has long championed a second chamber, citing benefits for inclusiveness and moderation in governance. Speaking at a prestigious media forum hosted by Africa Media Bureau in Accra, President Kufuor emphasized that concentrating appointment powers solely in the president's hands risks tilting political skills and eroding these institutions' autonomy.
Let's think of how we get to the German experience we are recommending, and that might be medium to long term. And that might also entail constitutional reform, and when we are reforming constitution, look at the institutions there. Would we be served better with a second chamber where the composition is not say, on the say-so of the president exclusively, but say on the composition of acknowledged, recognized institutions? That would take over from, say, the Parliamentary Vetting Committee, which tends to be lopsided sometimes. Now you go, some here would be there on appointments committee, and anybody coming from the party with all the defaults might just pass through. No, we pushed appointments to that second house of independent institutions to see whether the nominee really is befitting of consideration to become what we want to become. So please think of the now and then medium to long term. When you do that, propose, and then you might see that the convergence might come and we might still retain the checks and balances Paul is talking about.
Well, the former president also championed a bold vision for Africa. According to him, a powerful Pan-African media platform that unites the continent and reshapes global perception is what we need as we speak.
We still are locked into the blinkers of colonialism. We are Anglophone. My cousin in Cote d'Ivoire is Francophone. The next person is Lusophone. We do not know ourselves. You stop a person in the streets of Accra, you want to discuss something, say in Nigeria, you'd be lucky if this person would know anything. But similarly, a Nigerian may not even care to know about us. But if the professional media people would find a way to establish a powerful media agency, I've cited Al Jazeera, say here in Accra, very African, to tell African stories, not just political. It could be economic, it could be social, it could be entertainment, it could be trade, it could be industry.
You're still watching The Pulse. When we return, we'll bring you a conversation on why exactly the second chamber of Kufuor have been speaking about appointments. Please stay. Thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. To other stories now, the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, says it is cutting down on losses as it has begun enforcing measures to increase revenue mobilization. This assurance comes in the face of public backlash over the company's demand for over 200% increment in distribution service charge. Briefing the Energy Committee of Parliament on its operation in the last few months, the acting managing director of ECG, Engineer Julius Pepeka, says they are currently closing the gaps as they have been able to record consistent increase in revenue over the last few months.
The Parliament Energy Committee has begun day 2 of its 3-day monitoring visit to the agencies here at the Electricity Company of Ghana, where a number of issues have been coming up. Let's begin with the acting managing director of the company, Engineer Julius Pepeka, who in his briefing to the committee indicated a number of things. You will recall that the company suffered severe public backlash when they requested that over 200% increment in the distribution service charge, which is currently with the Public Utility Regulatory Committee for a final decision on that. A large part of the conversation has been for the company to reduce its losses and increase revenue before some of those demands can be met by the PURC. The acting MD said they are closing those gaps as it is recording consistent increase in revenue generation in the last few months, especially in July, where they recorded over 1.74 billion Ghana cedis in revenue.
This year, July, we had our highest ever revenue ECG collected, 1.74 billion Ghana cedis. It's a record, and we want to celebrate that. we want to celebrate that. Mr. Chairman, we have also implemented a number of initiatives to improve our internal processes. We want to reduce the frustrations applicants face in getting power supply or in getting meters. We know we have some issues in some of the districts and regions, and we are working to resolve that. Has asked for a certain percentage increase in the distribution service charge, not in how much customers will pay us. And so ECG is now asking that customers' tariff should be increased by 220%. Absolutely not. And what we are asking for can even be done without any corresponding increase in the end user tariff. We are...
Can you repeat that? Please capture him.
So the distribution service charge can go up without necessarily increasing the end user tariff.
Other key major issues in the public domain has been the conversation over missing containers at the port, some ECG contracts, which over 300 of them have been flagged to be defective. He said they have taken some decision on some of those contracts, as well as the contract between the ECG and HAPTEL with regards to commission payment. They have reduced that from 3% to some 1.65%, as well as being able to trace some 1,000 containers that have been reported missing.
We have started moving our containers from the port. So far, we've moved over 1,000 containers. Again, when we met in May, the news was that we couldn't trace a lot of our containers. I'm happy to say that we have traced all our containers, and we started moving them from the port. We have also taken steps to address issues around procurement. We identified about 347 contracts that we thought we could cancel, so that we reduce liabilities for ECG and for the government. And the board approved 202 for outright termination, and the rest we are working on them, doing additional due diligence to make sure that we can get out of them. Those that we can terminate, we will terminate them. I'm also happy to announce that HAPTEL and ECG have signed an amendment to the contract, and we have reduced the commission that we were paying to HAPTEL from 3% to 1.65%. We have worked to put in place measures to control expenditure. And so, if you take the first half year, we have reduced expenditure from 110 million from last year to 77 million. Okay. And administrative expenses have been reduced 279 million last year to this year only 169 million. And we are working to tighten the belt even more.
We can now hear from some members of the committee and the chairman, especially to some of this revenue generation, as well as the justification they've been making for that increment in distribution service tariff.
When the container issue came up, they went to some shops and places and show us pictures that some whites were having this. Acting director, is it true that we retrieve all the thousands if we retrieved, it's not entitlement on our part to accuse those people unjustly, or those that are found there are also part of the 1,000.
Districts to be working. And I'm saying this because ECG within my districts are not working. They don't work. I have too many problems. They don't get solved. Time without number. I have to call regional manager, regional engineer, Kwabena Champo, to complain before I have solutions.
Now, we want to increase your percentage by, I think, money terms. But it would rather be percentage terms, because when he was speaking, he said it should be 30 to 33%, right? That's what he said. But now you are getting around 11%. And when we increase in monetary terms, definitely PURC will increase the other end user tariffs also. So please, we need to look at that. It's very important.
VRA and Energy Commission, VRA, Gridco, ECG, NETCO, and PURC, including the ministry, we will be writing officially to want to meet on this tariff issue. There are certain things we all need to understand. We don't want the PURC to finish their stakeholder meeting, and then when they bring it to us, we will stop it there. No, we want all of us to be carried along.
The committee will continue with its interactions with the VRA, also here in Accra, and then they will move to the Eastern region to interact with some of the other companies there as well. From the Electoral House here in Accra, I am James Savaji for Joy News.
From that, the Minister of Communications, Digital Technology and Innovation, Samuel George, says that it is unacceptable and undemocratic for the standards of new media to differ from those of traditional media. The minister argued that many people exploit social media platforms to tarnish reputations and spread falsehoods. Well, he insists that operators of social media must be held to the same standards as conventional media. He made these remarks at an event organized by Africa Media Bureau aimed at examining and developing strategies for the sustainability of Ghana's media sector.
Must subject itself to the same rigors of conventional media. It is wholly unacceptable and indeed undemocratic for us to have different standards for new media broadcast and traditional media broadcast. Once you broadcast, the ethics and standards of the craft must govern your operations. I'm not here to speak of censorship, I speak of regulation. The media, be it traditional or new, cannot be said to be above regulation. It cannot be the Wild West, where incredulous allegations are made, reputations are damaged, and images are soiled irreparably, simply for clickbait. I cannot and will not, as the Minister for the sector, seek to regulate what media outlets publish. Absolutely not. I will never do that. That is your democratically protected editorial discretion. However, in the same way, my democratically elected mandate is to regulate through my regulators how your editorial discretion is broadcast. So what you say is yours, but how you say it is regulated by us. And so we must draw that fine distinction, especially with new media.
Well, the minister further revealed that people he referred to as self-acclaimed charlatans parading themselves as money doublers and men of God will soon be taken off television.
As men of God, men capital M, God small g. Instead of men of God, small m, capital G, and running all kinds of frivolous schemes in the name of God, need to be driven out of our airwaves like the temple with a regulatory whip. Money doubling and get-rich-quick schemes being broadcast by unscrupulous fetish priests have no place in our public broadcast. Pornographic and sexually explicit content masquerading as adult relationship shows cannot be allowed to continue soiling the innocence of our national airwaves. There must be sanity, and we must work together to achieve the same. We cannot put today's profit ahead of tomorrow's sanity. Let's agree as stakeholders to develop a roadmap together to clean up our airwaves.
Away from that, the Clean Air Fund is pushing for a consolidated national clean air policy, one clear framework with targets to replace the maze of uncoordinated rules spread across multiple agencies. Speaking at a clean air event here in Accra, the fund's Ghana lead, Desmond Appiah, said Ghana's fight against dirty air is being suffocated by scattered laws and weak enforcement. He cautioned the country risks losing its battle against one of the greatest threats to public health if immediate action is not taken.
I think we join our voice to the call for a consolidated national clean air policy. The reason for that call is because having a singular document or policy helps you to put targets in there. And the targets would then have timelines. Because what we have in Ghana is that there are so many documents or policies mentioning air quality or aiming to address air quality issues, but without the specific timelines and the targets that we want to achieve, by which percentage reduction, by which date, and by who. I think that it makes it a lot more difficult. But if you go and you have a singular policy which has consolidated all these bits and pieces, we can then use that as a guide to our aspiration as a people, where we want to be in the next 10 years, and then how do we break it into chunks? To say by 2030, we want to get to this point. By 2040, this is where we want to get to. How many lives do we intend to save and all that? So I think that is extremely important.
Well, the government has acknowledged the concerns, while the Environmental Protection Agency says it remains split over the debate. It insists the bigger challenge lies in enforcement. Salina Amwa is head of quality air at the EPA.
Let me add that we don't have the air quality policy specifically for air quality management. There's been a lot of discussion. Some are of the opinion that we need to have a separate policy for air quality. And others think that with all that I have mentioned, if they are embedded in other policies, must we get another policy? Because the policies are there, the issue is implementation and then enforcement. So that discussion is also ongoing.
You're still watching The Pulse. That story you just listened to was in collaboration with New Narratives and with funding provided by Clean Air Fund, which had no say in the story's content. You're still watching The Pulse. We'll be back after this quick turn. Please stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us here on The Pulse. The Obuasi East Municipal Security Council is stepping up efforts to ward off illegal miners operating along the banks of the heavily polluted Jimiri River in the gold mining town. Municipal Chief Executive Kofi William revealed the high turbidity levels of the river, serving as a major water source, is posing environmental and health concerns and challenges to the mining community in the area. Mr. Williams says the local security council is working closely with AngloGold Ashanti Mine to embark on a major swoop to evict all illegal miners along the riverside. More in this report.
Jimmy River, flowing through Obuasi like many water resources in southern Ghana, is heavily polluted from illegal mining operations. The river, running through the Obuasi East municipality, has over the years served as the water source to communities along it. MC for Obuasi East, Awuku William, shares plans by the local assembly to militate against the environmental menace.
So we've taken it upon ourselves as MC. The last time I met with the MISEC, we've put measures in place, and then we've actually budgeted, because the AGA has also been complaining that the water turbidity right now is very high. I'm talking about Jimmy River. So we've drawn a program of which they are given the KFS to make sure that KPI, to make sure that at least we need to go about all those indications and make sure that we embark on that particular operation. So we have decided that it's going to be in 2-3 phases. The first one, the AJ has agreed that he's going to share the cost with us, so that we're going to the riverside. All those who are working the illegal manners on the just by the river, just like what the president has said, that they don't want anybody to work in the water bodies. They don't want anybody to work in the forest. We need to comply with that. Hopefully by November, we should be able to embark on all those exercises to make sure that we do away with those who are working at the rivers, just to make sure that we have a clean water to drink, and also our forests are also not actually destroyed.
Mr. Williams spoke on the sidelines of the commissioning of a footbridge over the river in the Obuasi community. The pedestrian walkway at Pomposo, which was once in a deplorable state, affected daily commute of residents, claiming lives and threatening disasters. Project manager at Underground Mining Alliance, Bright Duho, explained the project is to safeguard community members.
We believe in the fact that in as much as we are mining in the various communities, the communities will need to benefit. So therefore, we thought it's part of our principles, working in their shoes, making sure that people are safe, not only on the mine site. In as much as we want the mine site to be safe, we want the community to be safe as well. Guess what? Most of our guys going to Accra, wherever, to access any part of the country, use this road. So therefore, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that not only our workers are going to be safe, our community people also need to be safe as well.
The MCE further highlighted other projects to elevate road construction networks in the area.
So I told my people that we need to have an alternative route for the people of Obuasi, because we have only one main road. So should in case something happen, no car goes, no car comes. So for them, so another bypass that we have to do. And then as I speak to you, we have constructed a bridge, which I have spoken to the Muslim leadership that they've agreed. We have demolished a mosque at Tetiaso. So that bridge has been constructed. And we are doing another one at just by the NIB bank. When that is done, we make sure that that's going to pave way, and then make sure that we can use that very particular as a bypass for the people of Obuasi East.
For Joy News, my name is Emmanuel Bright Kweku.
Well, away from that, water remains a vital part of everyday life, with growing concerns over limited access to safe and sustainable drinking water. Stakeholders are urging stronger partnerships and collective action to address the threats destroying water sources and limited access to potable water facilities. The call came during the 40th anniversary celebration of Water Aid Ghana, dubbed, quote, "Change Starts with Water," celebrating 40 years of impact and supporting local-led collaboration for the next 40, unquote.
The anniversary was not just an occasion for celebration, but a rallying point for action to safeguard Ghana's water resources, which continues to face mounting threats from human activities and climate change. Speaking at the ceremony, Country Director for Water Aid Ghana, Erabina Yani Akofo, called for locally collaborations to reduce dependency and draw accountability in enforcing sustainable water sources.
With all the decreasing financing available, how do we make sure that the next 40 years really bring strong transformation and really accelerate our work together to make sure that everyone everywhere has access to water, sanitation, and hygiene? We want to see more locally led collaboration. And in the midst of all the priorities, we know there's a lot of competing priorities, from blue energy to green energy to big push, resetting Ghana. We cannot do it without the power of water.
Head of Strategy, Policy and Campaigns at Water Aid Ghana, Ibrahim Musa outlined ongoing efforts among stakeholders to institutionalize a professional management approach linking communities and artisans to strengthen safe water delivery system in deprived areas.
Professionalized management approach means you are training communities and then link them to artisans who can readily be at hand to support them. But when the artisans come, communities on their own should mobilize some small funding to support the continuous maintenance and operations of the system. So moving from the community ownership, which we call the COM approach, to professionalized management approach, can be able to solve the sustainability challenges that we are having.
He further condemned the destructive impact of illegal mining on Ghana's water bodies, calling on traditional authorities and opinion leaders to back the government's efforts to protect these vital resources.
Thankfully, the government is doing what it can to ensure that water bodies are not polluted. What we need to do is to support government to win the Galamsey war. But also importantly, chiefs and opinion leaders, where there is heavy metals polluting water bodies, chiefs too should rise up and support government so that government can nip this Galamsey in the bud.
On his part, the Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Ahmed Ibrahim, assured communities struggling with water access that the ministry remains open to applications for waivers and approvals to ease their challenges.
If in your district you don't have a legacy project, you can apply to the minister that in my district I don't have outstanding debt that I want to pay. Based on that, I'm still appealing for a waiver to spend that money for legacy project on water. But you know your needs more than us.
Well, that's how we wrap up the polls. For more news, please log on to myjoyonline.com. Have a pleasant day as you enjoy the rest of our programs. Bye.